Hello, my name is Jon Reynolds. Welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with Jon Smith OBE. Jon is referred to as the original super agent, renowned for his pioneering role in the football industry. He founded the first ever football agency, significantly transforming the business of sports management. He's looked after some of the sport's greatest talents, including Diego Maradona and the entire England football team for years. All of this is even more impressive when I tell you he couldn't even speak until the age of 17 years old due to severe confidence issues. I'm really looking forward to talking with Jon, so let's get into it. Jon, thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Tell me, who is Jon Smith OBE?
Wow. I guess I'm the product of 70 years of life in the sport and entertainment market. And actually, during a period of time when the world evolved and did some amazing things, and I'm trying to defy gravity at 17, give myself another at least 20 years of this kind of energy level.
You look phenomenal for your age.
I didn't throw it out there for that, but thank you.
No,
Appreciate
you do.
it.
You got a twinkle in your eye, and it's sort of full of purpose and presence. And you've been a big part of mixing it, in terms of what you were saying then, the last 70 years. But take me back to a young Jon, starting out career-wise. What and who were the early influences for you?
I can't ever remember being able to communicate, because as a young kid, I couldn't talk. In fact, my real name's Jonathan, and I could never say it. So people would say, I was introduced with my parents, and people would say, "Hi," and your name is, and I'd go, and eventually John would come out, and they'd be so relieved to get something out. They go, "Oh, hi, John." So I never got the Atham bit. I couldn't say Atham. So I became Jon Smith.
But you would never know that. And of course, the career you've had with communication at the forefront. So tell me, was that an emotional thing? Was that a physical thing? Because it's a stamina is one thing, but getting your words out. Or were you just literally tongue-tied and almost afraid of talking?
It started as no communication. My brain at the time just didn't log on to speech. And I think there is a physicality in there, and I'm actually one of the patrons of the British Stammering Association. We call it STAMMA now, STAMMA, a great charity. And we found out that around about 2 years of age, your brain gets its pathways in certain physicalities, and one of them is fluency.
Right.
And 9.5 times out of 10, it hits the right path and off you go. Mine didn't. And in people who are disfluent, very often that's the case. It is a physical, neurological thing, which isn't really curable, except in circumstances it's dealable with.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But so I can't ever remember talking normally. And of course, the more you become disfluent or incommunicative, the more you become less confident.
Yeah.
So
That's
I became less and less and less confident. Yeah.
Growing up, influences and not being able to articulate yourself. What changed then? That's a key part of life up until obviously you were cured. What led you to being cured, and what cured you?
Okay, 2 or 3 things are embodied in my answer. The first is God tends to, if something is taken away, tends to give you something back. So I found that I was physically, as a young kid, very, very quick as an athlete. So I ended up, fortunately, I couldn't talk till I was about 17, 15, 16. But at 14, I ended up running for Great Britain. So that had given me my self-respect back, although I couldn't talk about it if I won. So that was part of it. And that came with its own issues. The coaching staff at the time were of a different caliber, shall we say, than what they are today. So there were things that went on in those days that perhaps, that were very wrong, very bad, and wouldn't happen today. And then I kind of managed that. And then my mum, who was my interpreter, sadly got cancer and died. And my dad promised her that he would find a cure for my speech, which was her biggest problem.
So there was a pledge there.
Me. Yeah, and bizarrely, there was something in the Daily Express action line about 6 months after Mum died about this miracle speech cure happening in the island of Jersey with a guy called Bill Kerr. And we managed to get on Bill Kerr's, or my dad managed to get me on Bill Kerr's speech cure. And off I toddled to Jersey for 2 weeks, which was a whole story because his cure, which was very effective, would never be allowed today because it involved taking the fear of words and giving you a bigger fear that if you didn't speak, something would hurt you more than you not speaking and therefore hiding away. So he physically hit me. There were 8 of us in the class, and he was about, as I remember him, he was about 8'12". He was huge. And an old ex-army Scottish guy, big.
And this is something you paid for to get beaten up.
We paid for it, and we all sat there, and he made us stand. He said, "You're all meek, mild guys, and forget the meek inheriting the earth in the Bible. It's a lot of old crap, that is." He says, "You've got to defend yourself." And he made us stand bolt upright and nod our head to every syllable and purse your lips. Nearly impossible to stammer. My name is Jon Smith. But if you did stammer, he physically hit you.
So you were more afraid of that?
Yeah, I got hit in the stomach. I remember lying on the floor hurting, and then he kicked me. And got up, did it again, didn't stammer that time. And that's how dramatic it was. And all 8 of us couldn't talk. And within a week, we were all cured.
Wow, that's compelling.
Astonishing.
It's also frightening.
Yeah, it's, how do you take, that was 1969, how do you take that cure and transpose it to 2024, 25 and make it work? No one's managed to do it. And Bill Kerr and I spent I was there for 2 weeks, and he taught me all sorts of tricks of the trade, of how to speak, how to pause, how to negotiate, how to do this, how to do it. And we came back really super confident individuals. Yeah. And we loved this guy, and he loved us, and he kept in contact with us for 10 years till he died, maybe 15 years till he died. And it was a real, from being, I guess if you're kidnapped and you fall in love with your kidnappers, it's one of those, isn't it? But this was just a hate-love relationship, and
but it ultimately worked.
He actually cried when we all gave him a hug goodbye. It was just intense.
I don't know where you learn that practice to be able to put it into practice, but it clearly worked.
Yeah, and he gave me all these wonderful little tricks, silly things like, if I'm sitting in a one-to-one with someone, especially when I was a bit younger and I was looking for a job and being interviewed, and you look at somebody, and it's very disconcerting for somebody if you just look at them. Most people when they're talking tend to look away, and you talk down here, or you talk with your hands. I'm very good at sitting there and just looking at you. I'll never blink because he taught me to look at the bridge of your nose.
All right.
It looks like I'm looking in your eyes.
Yeah.
But I'm not. And I can do this all day long.
I'm learning now. And
I pause. And the other guy has to wait for me. The other person has to wait for me. So all of these things.
So you learned communication in a crash course, because ultimately by 15, 16, you probably learned how to be a very good listener because you weren't communicating. But then you've had an incredibly unorthodox journey, including, like you say, things that couldn't happen, that wouldn't happen now. You'd hope they wouldn't happen now, in context of what you touched on with the coaches.
Can I ask you something there?
Yeah.
If you couldn't talk, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, John, but if you couldn't talk, and in a world of words, other than emails, which are also words in another form, and I gave you that option, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. It's going to hurt, and you're going to come away 2 weeks' time as a whole new, invigorated human being, set up for the rest of your life. Or you don't, you can just carry on the way you are. What would you do?
Yeah, it's difficult to imagine, but I'd do it. I think, isn't there a message there about facing your fears, or doing something that isn't going to be fun? I mean, I can't believe I'm going to say this in context of your question, but the cold shower. I have a cold shower every morning, and I hate it. Well, I'm not being punched, but I hate it. But I know I feel good for it. And it actually fires me up for the day where I've done something really I didn't want to have to do. I can't believe I brought it up in the context, but yes, I see what you mean. And that was a a fundamental problem for you where look at what you've done and let's come to that, because I imagine you were like a coiled spring. Yeah. You've come back from something that has cured something that has stifled you, held you back. What did you then do? Because you talk about looking for a job and so on, but I know sitting here what you have done. You became the first kind of super agent. You have worked at all levels of sport at the very top and so on. But how much of that suppression fired you to then be even more ambitious than perhaps someone else at 17, 18?
Yeah, I had a lot of catch up to do.
Yeah, exactly.
When I got to 16, there was a whole lot of life that I'd missed.
But you embraced that?
Yeah, I wanted to run at everything. So the first thing I did is leave school. Dad wasn't happy about. And I went to drama school because I could talk. I thought it was the obvious place to park myself. And I was a really crap actor. I mean, learn how to use
You had the confidence to do it. You wouldn't have had, yeah.
Absolutely. So I tried that after 3 months. I thought, no, I'm not going to be an actor. So I just, my next love was actually sport and music. And I went into music, and I was fortunate enough to meet some people who were involved at the time in Northern soul music.
Okay.
And it was starting to be a trend. Anyway, long story short, I embraced Northern soul, and we had a period of probably 8 years of recreating American R&B in fast beat, what was then called disco music. And we had all these all night raves in places like Wigan. Wigan Casino became the heartbeat of it, and the Twisted Wheel in Manchester. It was mainly in the north. And it became a big movement, and we had 8, 9, 10 hit records, and suddenly I was on the map, and I was a late teenager, and ran all that through the 20s in the music business, and then I sold out. And that was another bizarre story, because I was very happily married then to a lovely lady called Lee, and sadly she contracted leukemia. We thought there was a cure. It was then a very early stage. Bear in mind, this is 40 years ago.
Sure.
We thought she had a cure called a bone marrow transplant, and she was a bone marrow match with her sibling. So we thought, oh, she's going to be fine. And she wasn't. The cure didn't work, and she died sadly a horrible death at the time. Isn't that bone marrow transplant is much better 40 years on, and the drugs that suppress the rejection of the bone marrow, but they didn't have them in those days. And so, bizarrely, I sold out when I was 29 for £1 million, which in 1981 was a lot. It's a lot of money now, but it was a lot of money then. And I sold out on the Tuesday. Lee died on the Thursday, and it meant absolutely all the money and stuff meant nothing to me. I just, I didn't quite know what to do really. So I spent. We had a home in Los Angeles at the time because we were doing some music stuff over there. I just parked myself there, probably the bottom of a whiskey bottle, I think.
Did you have anyone around you at that time?
I had some wonderful people around me who cared enough to party with me to try and get me out of this. I think.
Did they see the side you put on? Did you put on a facade at that time?
No, they were very caring. In fact, there were two guys from New York, Alan and Peter, who I remain very, very close to these days. They've become part of they're like my soulmates because they carried me through it. But a lot of the other guys are probably dead now because it's a bad lifestyle. But I needed to go through that, and while I was there, I in my more sober moments, I went and watched a lot of sport. LA Raiders and things like that. It was all good fun, and I loved what they were doing in sport because back in the 80s in England, it was people were dying in stadia. We had Heysel and Bradford Fire, all that sort of stuff. I thought, no, I want to make this entertainment. So I came back with this idea in 1985, 86 that I could do football, which was the big thing, and I'm going to do it like America. I'm going to make it fun. And that's
more entertainment, media.
That was the basis of that was the basis of how we started First Artist.
Yes. No, and you need to tell me about that. But what I love about this is there's real innovation, there's real entrepreneurial drive through this, and continues through everything you've done.
Part of that was instilled in me. I mean, obviously it was in me, but part of it was Bill Kerr, who just gave me this drive. I'm going to give you a toy. It's going to be a toy to begin with. In fact, I wrote a whole document thing about, my new toy called speech. But it then became more of it than a toy. It became my toolbox for my future. And he helped steer it. I phoned him every Sunday, 10, 12 years, every Sunday night.
So he was like a mentor.
Walked through it with me every week. Yeah.
Gosh. So with that toolbox that you absolutely utilised, talk me through why there wasn't a kind of sports agents, and then how you were able to ultimately, it was 400 of the biggest names. It's what Diego Maradona, the England football team. I mean, you went stratospheric.
I got very lucky. I was very friendly before I left with a guy called Paul Mariner, who was a footballer who used to play for Ipswich Town and was ending his career at Arsenal, but he'd just come out of the England team, and he and I had this idea that we'd manage the England team like they managed their players in America. So I came back and met with the then England manager, Bobby Robson, who was wonderful and encouraging, and just became a really dear friend of mine over the years. And Bobby allowed me to introduce these silly ideas that I'd learnt in LA. And I brought in companies like Coca-Cola and the Mars Corporation, and we had all these fun things. The players loved it because it was the start of them earning proper money.
I was just going to say, so that actually points to you.
Yeah, I was there at the beginning.
Yeah.
So we did these stupid things like, I'd get Coca-Cola to put advertising boards, because the FA didn't want any of this really. They didn't, you can have a little bit of money, but our big sponsor is Umbro, so don't go anywhere near us. But they allowed me to do it. So we put all these advertising boards around the ground with the players, where the England games were, and Bobby would allow me to tell the team the day before the game where the boards were going to be. So if you score, lads, we need to celebrate in front of the boards. And if you look back at some of the old footage of England in the 80s, late 80s, you'll see them score and go, yeah. And then they're like, where are we going to run to? Was it, oh, there it is, look. And they all charge off down there and they celebrate in front of the board. So there was me going back to Coca-Cola and saying, well, that's worth, what's another £500,000, isn't it? Whatever. And then they said, yeah, it is. But the problem is that you're obscuring the board. We can't see the advert. So Paul Gascoigne said to me when we talked about it to the England team, he said, I tell you what we'll do. I'll dive on the floor, and all the lads could dive on top of me. And that's how diving in football started.
I did not know that. I love that. And actually, talking about players like Paul Gascoigne, there's so much injection of money that's come into the game in different ways. And again, instrumental to you. I loved it when we were talking pre-filming about your, again, entrepreneurial innovation that has sort of led to the power of the football boots and the branding. Yeah. And you must, in your own words, you must tell me how you kind of manipulated that, if you like.
Because we were making quite a lot of noise, I caught the eye of a rather entrepreneurial guy called Rupert Murdoch. And when the whole discussion started about the Premier League, there was Rupert Murdoch, David Dean, Philip Carter, a whole bunch of people, and me sort of sitting over here somewhere as the agent saying, well, I can do this and we can do that. And so I was part of that journey, and we wanted to make football fun. So we got them to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things, the team. And for instance, when they ran on, if they didn't have boot deals or whatever, we got them a boot deal. And they when the team substituted a player, in those days there were like 3 or 4 cameras at the ground. Now there's about 40 odd, maybe even more. There was nothing else for the director to point, as opposed to, because we let the player come off and then our player would run on.
The players stopped as well, right? So all eyes are on.
Yeah, it was a player stopped. There was nothing else for the cameraman to shoot and the director to shoot. And we'd say, right, just run on the field, just tighten up your bootlaces. So there was the Nike Flash or the Adidas or whatever it might be. Yeah. And nobody ever asked us, why didn't he tie his boots up before he got on the field? So we kind of got away with it until one day we were in Norway, we were playing Norway, and I decided it'd be great fun if there was a player, it was only a friendly game, so we didn't do In the heavy competitive stuff, we didn't do very much of this, but it was a friendly against Norway. And we had Trebor as a sponsor. And so we thought it would be really good. But when the kit man comes on, when there's an injury, the physio runs and he puts his bag down. He's got his little sponge, his ice bucket, whatever. And we put adverts on his bag. Because again, that's the list of players badly hurt. That's the pictures you're going to be getting. And we put in Norwegian, we put it in English one side and Norwegian on the other. And it was supposed to be the extra strong mint. And we got it translated in Norwegian on one side of the bag. But someone gave us the wrong translation. And it came out as suck on a hard one. Oh no. And so we got caught out a little bit by that. And so we had to behave. By that time, of course, everyone was having fun with it.
Yeah, of course.
And it was the way forward. And that's the start of how we had dancing girls before the games of Premier League and some sort of stuff, which didn't work.
No, but again, probably from America.
Yeah,
some cultures where.
It was
you know what I love though? Again, that entrepreneurial trait. You're trying, you're failing, but failing fast and moving on. And enough of the things that you did try, there's plenty of other stories you could tell me, have changed fundamentally how we watch football and what we know. All the boards around the ground, the boot deals, they're huge money now.
And also, it's become. Other than George, Paul and Ringo, this is the biggest emotional export Britain's had.
Sure.
Ever.
Yeah.
I mean, a fifth of the world's population watches the Premier League every weekend.
That's massive, isn't it?
It's huge. I mean, you're talking 2 billion people.
But just because we're on and things have moved so much now with Saudi Arabia and these leagues that are, what are your thoughts on where the game's at? Because sport is so intricate in people's lives. There are people that will never kick a ball, that are working in a factory, but football's everything to them. Their club is everything to them. They support their country. Do you think that kind of loyalty and that kind of what's always been legacy with football is changing slightly with so much money that's come into the game? You know, you can sometimes see a player that, dare I say, isn't trying as hard as they should. There's politics behind the scenes because there's so much money. Do you think that's something we need to be aware of and careful of?
Again, it's a really very good question because it does worry us a little bit. I'm very proud of what we do, and I don't have a problem with the fact that the big investment funds and now nation states want to own Premier League clubs. Now, how do you manage that going forward? Because technically, Man City owned by UAE or Newcastle owned by Saudi Arabia, they can outspend everybody.
Yeah. And
so there's got to be some sort of cap that works. The cap doesn't really work at the moment. No. It's very, I wouldn't say it's badly thought through. It's thought through with every good intention, but it's not functioning the way it should do. So somehow, I mean, you take Saudi Arabia. I was in Saudi Arabia last week, and they love their sport. I think it's great, but what the government's doing essentially is saying, socially, we're not overly acceptable yet on the global stage, so we'll engage with the sports lovers. I can remember, I was advising the then Secretary of State, Oliver Dowden, during the pandemic when he was Culture Secretary. And I remember being in Downing Street and saying to the people around, we have to bring back football. We've just gone into lockdown. The repository of the emotions of our nation largely sit in sport now. Years and years ago, national disasters, you'd go to church, synagogue, mosques, wherever you went. That's not the case now. You're stuck at home. You need to just shout at the television.
Yeah, and it brings people together.
Exactly.
Grandparents, kids, all watching a game.
I think football and I think nation states like Saudi have realised that they can actually influence the world's public by buying into and buying up golf, tennis, football, boxing, and encourage people to look towards Saudi Arabia as a future partner, and which is exactly what is happening now. The only downside of all that is how do you regulate it so that money doesn't become the determining factor.
Sure.
And sport and competition remains at the top of the agenda.
Yeah, no, well said. And actually, sort of on that similar kind of trend where so much of this ultimately culminates in success. Sitting here now, there's so many things you've done that have been successful, and actually, rightly so, you've been awarded the OBE for services to football. Sitting here now, how would you define success?
On a personal level, being of senior age, there are, if you asked me that 20 years ago, I'd say success is I've arrived at the railway station. Now I'm at my destination. I want to make the destination better, more exciting, more vibrant, more this, more that. I think sitting here in my 70s, I kind of think I stand on my balcony at my home in Spain and look at the ocean, and being able to smile with a contentment, and just, I think that was very important actually in a somewhat rabid, goofed up world, to have contentment in your mind and your physicality. I mean, fortunately, I'm still physically able to do stuff.
Yeah.
And I said at the top end of this, being able to be energized for the next 20 years is now my ambition on the personal
For
level.
longevity.
Yeah, I want to keep that going. But yeah, I think it's the ability to be able to be contented. I think that is such a powerful word, and unless you have the physical ability and mental strength, is that the right word? Probably not, but the mental capacity, mental mindset to sit back and be contented, then life will always be a problem.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you for a lot longer, Jon, but
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me.
More than welcome.